podcast people, and they always start the same way. Thank you for being, thank you for having me. It's an honor. Da 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 da. It's just so cool, you know. Anyway, but anyway, some of my favorite podcasts are the Exam Room podcast, which is Dr. Neil Barnard's group, and they have just absolutely fabulous guest speakers, and of course Dr. Barnard's on there, but a lot, and every time he talks, there's always some really good stuff. Nutrition Facts with Dr. Greger, awesome. And the thing I like about him is because he doesn't mind sharing all the references, and so you get all his little video clips and everything. You go down, you got the script, and you've got all the references, so I can quickly read articles and stuff, which really makes sense for somebody like me. I don't have time to dig and so on. So he's not shy about saying, I do the work, and you share it, and he's really cool from that standpoint. And then I like Plant Strong also. That's Rip Esselstyn's podcast, and he just started about 8-9 months ago, I think, as he did an immersion for a firehouse in New York. And then kind of the gist of the podcast was to follow one of the firefighters to kind of help him on his journey, and then he had a number of guest speakers to help reinforce what they were learning. So, again, you can have me as often as you want because it's a never-ending story. I discover new things every day. I get excited, and I just like to share them. So the Plant Strong episode 3 was one that got my attention. This featured the team Scherzay, and it's a husband and wife neurologist from California. And they wrote a book called Alzheimer Solution, and they are some of the leading researchers in Alzheimer's at this time. They have a lot of experience and a lot to say about what do you need to do to keep your brain healthy. And eating plants, of course, is a big one, but then there's a few other things. You know, as I'm driving to Northwest Arkansas on sleep deprivation mode, after doing a residency where we were, you know, pretty much encouraged to see how far we could push our limits and how many hours we could go without sleeping and still functioning. And then having babies and working in a university setting, you know, 80, 90 hours a week, and then feeding the kids at night, and, you know, and so on, and then move on to being room mom, and et cetera, et cetera. Sleep was never a big priority of mine, and also I always prided myself to say I could survive on 3 to 4 hours. As I got older, you know, in my 60s now, I need about 6 hours, which is still, according to them, not enough. Sleep is essential for brain health. Now, your parents would have told you that, but how is this working? So the one fact that they bring up is Alzheimer's is increasing by 87% in the past 10 years. So there's really been a huge spike in a number of people diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And it's probably not a coincidence. They address the fact that 90% of this is preventable, which is kind of different than what the media would tell you. They say Alzheimer's is genetic. If you got the gene, you're pretty much doomed. Well, they say that's not true. And I thought this podcast was worth mentioning just for that. And I do want to read the book and have more information about it. There's about 20 to 30 genes that have been identified as a cause of Alzheimer's in about 3% of people. So that does not account for the huge number of persons diagnosed with Alzheimer's, because there's a disconnect. I mean, if 100% of the people with the gene were expressing the gene, you would only have 3% of people with Alzheimer's, and you have a far greater number. So how do you prevent it? Nutrition, exercise, stress reduction, and sleep. So need for sleep again. Long-term sleep disruption will cause damage to the brain. Even just one night without sleep causes your brain to malfunction. And they did some, and this was some older research that was done on when they were preparing astronauts for their flights. If you go without sleep one night, you are actually no more functional than if you were legally drunk.
Wow.
So that's that was pretty impressive. We need about 7 to 8 hours each night. Of course, there are some individual variations, and some of us maybe a little less. But you got to reboot It's like turning your computer off and doing the upgrades. You cannot expect your brain to function. You know when you click on your computer and it says, this program cannot be running while we do the upgrade? This is what's going on in our brain. And what sleep does is it helps consolidate your memory. So basically, you have a ton of stuff going on in your brain. A lot of it is junk. Some of it is worth keeping. And then you also have to figure out how to retrieve the information. And what sleep does is it allows for the junk to be sorted out and discarded. It allows then for the brain to catalog and put things in the proper place so you can then access your memory. I love the janitor cells. I mean, I have a very vivid visual imagination, and whenever things like this are going on, I see the little guys with the little broom, you know, and those little scrubbies, and but literally there are some cells. You have the brain cells, and then you have the cells that produce these very long kind of sheets, Schwann cells, and they basically are your insulators. So they wrap the brain cells and the extensions of the brain cells with a fatty layer, which is why some people say we need to eat cholesterol, because those cells contain cholesterol. And then you also have some cells that are in between, and we didn't know for a long time what these things did. We now know that they're called janitor cells, and when you go to sleep, these cells get active, and they start cleaning up the mess that was made inside your brain when you were awake. It's the coolest thing in the world. They will not work if you're not sleeping. Wow. So if you don't sleep, consider yourself in a really nice restaurant that gets trashed. And little by little, there's more and more trash all over the floor. And eventually, you're not going to want to be in that restaurant, you know. So one night of deprivation also increases this beta amyloid level. The beta amyloid level is a protein that you can measure in the brain, and it seems to be associated with some increase. Those are some of the things that form some of the plaques in Alzheimer's, and also maybe involve also in things like MS and those sort of things. So the rise in this level seems to correlate with the damage to the brain, which then correlates with the development of dementia and Alzheimer's. So you got to have good sleep. So this is where my husband and I disagree, because you know he's frugal, and the good temperature part. You know, in the summer it's 80 degrees, and in the winter we're freezing. And I proved to him, you guys, if you get your temperature at a steady 76, I'm not excessive here in my house, 76, versus letting it go high in the daytime and having to crank your hair down, my bill was only about $20 more in 1 month. So I proved to my husband that it wasn't, but he still doesn't get it. You need a good pillow. Make sure you're well supported. You need darkness, okay? So all the little blinky lights that are in your life, you know, and oh my gosh. I mean, it's not just now the neighbor's floodlights that are in your room, but it's also your watch, your phone, your alarm clock, if you have one. If you have a TV in your room, there's usually a little blue light, a thing that communicates with the remote control. There's a little red light. If you happen, in our case, because of the way our weird wiring in our house is, we have to have the Wi-Fi thing in the room. So there's a blue light. And then we discovered the hard way, you put a little power strip and you plug it into the wall so you can get all your devices that blink plugged in. And that thing has a blue light that's like as bright as a day, you know, staring at you. So we have duct tape everywhere. Because you can't turn off the machines, but you can obliterate the thing. It's just, it's a nightmare. White noise. So like the sound of ocean and just kind of a general background, kind of like they do for babies. You can probably get yourself a little baby thing that makes a comfortable noise or something. Sometimes it will help. And their acronym for what to do to be healthy is NEURO: nutrition, eat plants, exercise, unwind, meaning de-stress. My husband had a revelation the other day. I have to pick on him. I wish he was here because I could pick on him with him here. But he got the worst thing possible he could have on his phone, an app that tracks his sleep quality.
I've got one too.
So he obsesses over it. I mean, every morning I get the report. And I think it picks up my snoring too. Or if I walk around the room, it thinks he's up or whatever. So he's mortified. My sleep quality is only 50%, this and that. But guess what? The other day, what he did. So we had friends, and we had a blast. So we were out picking cotton. So we got some exercise, some fresh air. He didn't work until the last minute before he went to bed. He went to bed at about 10 o'clock. So my mother always said hours before midnight, count double. And he reached a summit of sleep quality of 95%.
Yeah.
Will he learn from me? I don't know. I will let you know next time I talk to you. But I mean, there is something about, I don't know, put me in front, I watch a little video on weaving every night, and that puts me right to sleep. Not that it's not interesting, but I mean, it's my bedtime story and all that. I think I have good quality sleep, but for some people, those blue screens and everything are very, very damaging in terms of putting you in a sense that your brain thinks it's daytime, it's morning, and so you're on an alert. Also, restore and optimize, so meaning that you do have to take steps to kind of, what should I say, heal from all the stress and things that you're going through every day. And then optimize meaning that you need to, kind of, the circumstances that you're in, you can't always change them, but you can change how you look at them. And you can optimize how you deal with it. I mean, some people get all flustered and stressed for just about anything. And it's like you can't change it. So why do you get all upset? I mean, you can get upset. And they point out that stress sometimes is helpful because it helps you grow, it helps you change, it helps you mature. But then there's a point in time when you just go around in circles and get all stressed out. It's pointless. The Neuralink, I don't know if it's going to work because I'm not connected to the internet. So let me show you real quick. Hang on a second. Because I pulled it up and it may not. Oh, here it is down here. Okay, here it is. So you can go to their website and they give you everything you're supposed to do. See, Neuroplan, nutrition, exercise, unwind, restore, optimize. And you can read all this. So nutrition for your brain, look at all the food you're supposed to eat. Hint, hint, avocados, beans, blueberries, broccoli, even a little coffee is okay, but not immediately before bedtime. Dark chocolate, these are all music to my ears. Herbal teas, leafy green, seaweed, whole grains, etc., etc. Avoid processed food, chips, cookies, and all these fancy stuff that they make to make you think that you're eating healthy, but you're not. Red meat, chicken, butter and margarine, fast food, sugary drinks, and excessive alcohol. Okay? These are many names of sugar, and I'm not going to dwell on this. Exercise, you got to keep moving. Those of you who exercise, when you keep moving, you have a sense of well-being. That you get more alert and everything. You increase the blood flow to all your organs, including your brain. But you have to do a little bit of everything. And don't forget those of us who are a little more mature. If you have some issues with your balance, you can relearn it. I couldn't do this, 10 years ago. My trainer taught me to do it. He challenged me. Now I can do this on a wiggle board. And then I can use my hands and do exercises with a band on a wiggle board. Pass, themes on a wiggle board. Okay? You can learn. What happens when we get older, we start adapting, hunching. And then the next thing you know, and it just really rubs me the wrong way when we go to my husband drove me one time to the Senior Expo. Do I have to go? First of all, I petrified them because my blood sugar was normal. It was 60, and they panicked. I thought I was going to drop dead from hypoglycemia. And I'm like, no, I said, I'm fine. Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. Because I'm a doctor, I can handle it. And then the blood pressure people. Oh, I'm 60 years old and my blood pressure is only 110/50. And they thought I was taking too much medicine. I'm like, I'm not taking any medicine. Oh, but you're low. And I'm like, no, I'm normal. And then you went to the place where they talked about preventing injury. It's all about rails in your house and little things that you can sit so you don't, God forbid that you get exercise going up the stairs. And then the one after, right next to that was the coffin company. I mean, you know. Anyway, balance is so important. I took care of a little old lady, and she sat in a chair all day long, and then she took the shape of the chair, and then when you tried to stand her up straight, she thought she was falling backwards, right? So one time we purposefully forgot her walker, because walkers are bad because they make you go like this, and then she wanted to walk around the gym at church, and you know what? As she walked and assisted just on the arms of a couple of strong men, you could see this woman start standing up straight.
Wow.
So we take her to the, you know, and you don't have to do fancy stuff. We take her to Pinnacle, and I'd have her walk with her walker. Kids were behind with a wheelchair. She'd walk a mile, didn't even realize it, because she was outside. And then we'd throw little hacky sacks at her. You know, so I'd say, kids, throw stuff at Green, and so she'd catch them. You know, exercise. That was more exercise than she would do. But if the physical therapist came up to her and said, you got to exercise, we got to exercise, no, I don't want to do it. But I could make her play for an hour. It was fun, you know. So you got to find something fun, you know, and something you like to do. Sit stand, for example, is like a killer exercise. My trainer made me do 100 of those. I didn't think I was going to make it, but I did. So it's incredibly empowering to know that at 61 years old, I can do 100 sit stand. And then we went to 80 something else and back down and back up. Okay, so there's like, whoa. I was really proud about that. So stretches, planks, curls, unwind, manage the stress, okay? Breathing. When you get stressed out, you tend to hold your breath. Not a good idea. So the one thing you can always do when you get stressed is take a deep breath. My mother said, breathe and think before you speak. Restorative sleep. Normalize your schedule. To me, that's an important thing. We tend to go to bed at all sorts of different times. The chickens always go to bed at the same time. Oh, well, when the sun goes down. And, you know, eating late at nights, caffeine close to bedtime. You know you're sleep deprived when you can drink a cup of coffee and fall asleep.
Yeah.
When you
know,
can't?
When you can.
When you can fall asleep. Yeah. You know, light during the day, not at night. For some, avoid napping, although some people say cat naps are helpful. Meditation, comfortable, etc., etc. You can go to their website and pull this up and read all you want.
I've uploaded it to ours under your name also.
Hmm?
I've uploaded it to our website
Oh,
under your
fabulous,
name
fabulous.
also.
Yeah, because this one, we had this.
Mhm.
So anyway, let me get back out of this and back into the presentation. Now we're back. So need for sleep, we talked about that. So anyway, so just a plug for sleep.
Mhm.
All right. The other podcast I listened to that I thought was enlightening is the interview that Rip Esselstyn had with Chuck Carroll. Chuck Carroll is the journalist, broadcaster who does the Exam Room podcast. And he used to be 450 pounds. Look at this cute little guy. I mean, he's like 160 pounds now. He lost 265 pounds.
Wow.
I just want to mention him because he does explain about his food addiction. He was addicted to Taco Bell, and he would go every night and buy a big bag of Taco Bell stuff. And if he couldn't get it, he would become very, very violent. Now, connection with kids in school and bad behavior the food addiction is definitely as bad as drugs when it comes to making you fly off the handle. Chuck said that he would try unsuccessfully to control his appetite and to not eat those foods and get on a healthy diet. And one time he was on day 2 or 3 of trying to eat well, and he wanted that Taco Bell so bad that night, and he got so violent that he punched a hole in the wall of his apartment.
Wow.
Yeah, and he said, don't underestimate it. It is as bad as a drug addict and withdrawal, and the hormones and the neurotransmitters in the brain that are at play are the same. You're dealing with the same stuff. So when we see people that are grossly overweight, they don't want to be that way. They don't do this on purpose. They're caught in a trap, you know, the pleasure trap, and they're caught in a trap of what the food industry has done to them. And I see it in my practice every day. You know, I take care of kids, and I don't need to listen to the parents because I know the story. Oh, let me tell you, your baby was eating vegetables before he turned 1, yeah, and then you started them on people food, and then they quit the vegetables, yeah, then they quit the fruits, yeah, then they quit the plain potatoes, yeah, and the next thing you know, all they want is processed foods. And some worse than others, just the same as some people can have a glass of wine and not become alcoholic, and some people just can't resist, you know, so there's some individual, you know, variations in the way these foods will affect you, but they're, for the most part, very addictive. And we have to keep that in mind when we're working, or talking to our friends and family, or working with people as professionals, because that is a reality. And Chuck says it so well. So I recommend listening to Rip's podcast and listening to Chuck's testimony, because it brought a whole new dimension to the struggle that somebody has, particularly in the early transition phases. It's not as easy as just eat your vegetables.
No.
It is a struggle for some people. So 420 pounds and addicted to Taco Bell, and all this stuff really messes up your brain.
Mm-hmm.
Then I love Dr. Clapper, and Dr. Clapper is associated with Dr. McDougall Center and with True North, which is where they do the water fasting, and he's a hoot. He's an MD, and he's got a sarcastic sense of humor that is just absolutely endearing to me. He was interviewed about paleo and low carb diets, and he just let it all out. I mean, it was just so cool. So anyway, so basically, one of the big the proponents of paleo is that our ancestors ate animals, and there are a lot of data now that is suggesting the contrary. For one, our bodies are not set up to eat rotted meat. We are not set up to really kill anything. I mean, I always kind of, I don't really enjoy it. I hate the show, but sometimes I kind of curiously look at the Naked and Afraid.
Mm-hmm.
And those poor people are just chasing grasshoppers and frogs and something that jumps around, and you see how difficult it is for them to catch any little thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they really are starving. And then there's the fruits and the berries, and maybe if they would have just found out what was edible, they could eat them. But in the movie, The Game Changers, they had some amazing data that showed the bone analysis of paleo bones, and they showed that the composition of the bones is dependent on your diet, and a diet that's primarily plant-based will light up on their under their measurements differently than a diet that's animal-based. Guess what? They were plant-based, according to that. Also, fossils showing teeth remnants with lots of plant residue, et cetera, et cetera. So there's more and more evidence that's mounting to support the hypothesis that our ancestors were eating a high-fiber, plant-rich diet, maybe with an occasional piece of animal, but really not. There's some problems, is that our bacteria will turn carnitine, which is one of the components of the animal diet into TMAO. And TMAO is that new kid on the block. It's a chemical that is produced probably by the gut bacteria and causes a higher amount of damage to the arteries in the presence of the fat that you consume. So if you want to really work on your heart attack, go for the beef. But then you also have endotoxins. Endotoxins are chemicals that the bacteria are producing, and they're toxic to the host. So endotoxins are what make people have fever, drop their blood pressure, and sometimes die. And these endotoxins, when they're released after the bacteria that's in the meat and dies, they will also generate an immune response in your body, which then can get that system revved up so much that there is some correlation between these foods and the autoimmune disorders. And so you wonder why your immune system's out of control and kind of like a runaway truck. The other thing is when you cook the meat, so you say, okay, I'm going to take care of the bacteria, so I'm going to cook the meat. Then you have all the hydrocarbons and the heterocyclic amines that are produced, and these are the byproducts of cooked flesh and protein, which are very, very, very toxic. Just the smoke of a grill will let you inhale stuff that's about as bad as a cigarette, and then you eat it. So it's and it's linked to colon cancer, all sorts of cancers, but primarily GI cancer as well. Methionine is another amino acid, and that turns into homocysteine, which is also a damaging chemical to the arteries. So it kind of goes hand in hand with the TMAO. Then, because of the high protein, when these proteins are broken down, they're broken down into the chain link components of protein, which are called amino acid. And when those amino acids enter your bloodstream, they cause slight changes in acidity of your blood, and then your bones react immediately to that, release calcium carbonate, which is like Tums, and cancels out the acid because your body does not want to be acid. And then you pee it out. So you melt your bones away and you work on your kidney stones all at once, And then of course, because of the byproducts of the protein, you also, put yourself at risk for gout and kidney stones that are uric acid related kidney stones. So you get a lot of good stuff going on, that's going to keep our medical machine going. Then the excess protein, you can't store it. You either pee it out or it's going to get processed in some way through the liver. But, if you have more carbohydrate than you need in a meal, what do? You put it in the form of starch called glycogen in your body, and it gets ready to be released when you're fasting. You can't do that with protein. So the protein will go to the liver, and they cause an increase in IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor 1, which is great when you're a kid because it makes you grow, but it's terrible when you're an adult because it makes you have cancer. And then the saturated fat injures your artery wall, and then it also further impairs your ability to clear the cholesterol out of your system, and it increases inflammation by the bringing in arachidonic acid, which is like the first chemical that your body needs in order to produce all these chemicals that are eventually causing inflammation. The stuff that makes your skin turn red and swelling and pain and all that, those chemicals all derive from some of the components of fat. And then on top of that, the animals concentrate the pesticide, herbicides, heavy metals, and antibiotics that they've been fed. So, people freak out because they're eating, oh my God, I'm eating kale that had a little bit of pesticide on it. Well, you can wash it off. But then the cow that ate the corn that had the pesticide, all that pesticide's in the flesh, and you can't wash it off, and you're eating it. Think about the mercury in the fish and all that kind of stuff. So that's you get a good hefty dose of pesticides by eating animals. And then iron. Okay, so that's a pet peeve of mine because, everybody thinks you got to have meat to have iron. And meat has been promoted as a big iron, producer for the gut because of the heme iron. So you have two types of iron that is loose, if you wish, and then also iron that is associated with a molecule that transports oxygen, hemoglobin. That's what we call heme iron. The heme iron is absorbed unregulated. So whatever's in the GI tract, a bunch of it's going to come in whether you need the iron or not. There's definitely some issues about too much iron causing problems for your body. If you take the iron that's non-heme iron from the plants, your body will precisely adjust how much you need depending on what you need. So let's say you bled half to death because you had an accident and you're low on iron and you eat plants, your body's going to absorb more iron for a while until you get caught up. And then when you got enough, done. You go back to your baseline. But if you're taking heme iron, even if you're clogged up with iron, you're still going to absorb all the heme iron. So that's something to keep in mind as well, because that's also back to the brain health. Too much iron is not good for your brain and internal organs. And then there's this neuro 5-GC, or oxalic acid, that's made by animals. And this is something you don't find in plant. And again, you see the theme: pro-inflammatory, inflammatory, inflammatory, inflammatory. You hear doctors talk about metabolic syndrome and inflammation. I saw a kid in clinic today. It was very interesting. So she had some belly aches and stuff, and and then I looked at her teeth. Her teeth were well kept. It's obvious that this kid was brushing her teeth, and she didn't have any cavities, but her gums were red. This was a 10-year-old with gingivitis.
Really?
Mm-hmm. So she has gingivitis, migraine headaches, and belly aches. And I said, there is a connection between the three, and that's what you're eating, which is mostly chicken nuggets and the usual kid stuff, right? And I pointed out to her mom. I say, see those gums? And she said, oh, she needs to floss better. I said, no, she's flossing fine. Her teeth are clean. But the inflammation of the gum correlates with the inflammation in your heart, too, you guys. And so as we get much more mature and older, there's been a connection between gingivitis and cardiac disease. See, because it's the same phenomenon that creates both inflammation. So I could just look at their mouth and know what they're eating or what they're not eating. So there you go. Food can kill you.
Yeah.
Get you straight to hell. All right. Oh, well, we had to talk about poop a little bit. You cannot get away from, with me not talking about a little bit of poop. So gut bacteria 101. They've been pestering me to do a microbiome talk, and the problems with it is there's so much. So much. And it's just this was a good little summary. Okay, Dr. Jim Loomis was in January 2018 did a little talk on that. And basically, we had a really hard time trying to figure out all the gut bacteria in the gut, because growing a gut bacteria is tough because they don't like oxygen. So you can't just kind of scoop some poop and plop it into a petri dish and grow it, because you have to take all the oxygen out. So it's very complicated. So up to this point, until we started doing DNA testing on poop, we were not fully able to appreciate the variety of organisms that were living in our bowels. But we know now through genetic testing that there's 3 to 10 times more bacterial cells than our own in the body. So we're basically a walking bacteria factory that is with a skeleton of human. There's 100 times more DNA from bacteria than ours. So we're outnumbered, y'all. So we better pay attention to them, because they got us. Now there's a connection with the brain. We always talk about the brain-gut axis, and there's a really good, aside from the neurotransmitters and the information that goes from your gut to your brain, there's actually a good piece of evidence that the bacteria in your gut will produce neurotransmitters, which are basically the chemicals that your nerve cell use to talk to each other. They're going to produce their own, and it's going to affect your brain. In other words, and I tell all my patients this, I said, so if you eat Taco Bell every night, you're selecting out groups of bacteria that love Taco Bell leftovers. And depending on what you eat, you'll select different bugs. And those Taco Bell leftover bugs secrete neurotransmitters that are causing your brain to understand this as a craving for Taco Bell. The gut bacteria will dictate what you eat. So you can take it one of two ways. Oh, Mom, it's not my fault if I love Taco Bell. My bacteria are responsible for my cravings. Or you can take matters in your own hand and select bacteria that are going to be nice and friendly to you and make you crave kale. You know? And some of us who've been on the journey can tell once you change your diet, you start disliking some of the past foods. There are some that still kind of call your name, but in the vast majority, you'll notice that, you know, if you don't have greens for a couple of days, you're going, I really want my greens. You know, I mean, we've been there. So there's also a role in mental illness about the gut bacteria and autism. Okay, so there was a study that was done where they took people with anxiety disorders and they divided them into two groups, and this couldn't have been a double blind, obviously, because the diets. So one group took a whole food plant-based diet and the other group took an anti-anxiety medication. And guess which group got better? The plants. They reported a better score on their reduction of anxiety scale, etc., than the medication people. So very important to keep that in mind, because you know, a good example of that is Dr. Dean Ornish. You all heard about Dr. Dean Ornish, right? Well, he was about to commit suicide when he was 18. And he met one of his mentors, or somebody he knew, said he should eat differently, because he was a good old Texas boy eating hamburgers and French fries and steaks and stuff like that. And so this person told him, you better eat better, and told him to eat plants. And so Dr. Ornish decided at that age that even though it was hard for him to get through the day due to his depression, he might put the suicide on hold for a little bit and kind of see if eating differently would make him feel better. And it did. Fast. Within days, he felt better. And so, you know, the rest is history. This man has now saved the lives of thousands of people through the work that he's done. And so, you know, you never know when you talk to one person what's going to happen. But it also was amazing that he never took a drug to reverse his depression. It strictly happened by eating better. You know, I always tell that to all my patients. I said, you know, I see too many kids on drugs. I mean, they're on so many anti-psych drugs. Yeah. And I said, you know, maybe kale would do it. Yeah. And then so what's a normal gut bacteria though? Because many of the studies are done on white American males eating a standard American diet. So we know what a bad gut bacteria group is. So we kind of have to go see what's going on. So this is where it gets very complicated. So they have the Bacteroides and the Firmicutes, and then if you have more Bacteroides, you're more healthy, but then you listen to the next speaker and they might contradict themselves. But where they all agree is if you change your diet, you'll have some shift in bacteria. And generally speaking, you'll have shift towards, you know, if you eat, you know, processed foods and things, towards bacteria that are going to produce things that are less helpful to you, or maybe even harmful, and others will have more helpful. The other thing that the researchers agree is that the healthier your gut will be if you have a broader diversity of bacteria. And that is why, remember in the last talk we talked about if you eat a rainbow, you'll poop a rainbow, and you'll turn into a unicorn too, but you will be healthy. You know, the person who eats nothing but kale, as much of a kale fan I am, will not have as much of a diversity in their gut as somebody who's eating yellow and green and purple and all sorts of things. So eating a broad variety of plant foods will ensure that you're feeding different populations of healthy bacteria and having that, you know, it's like your financial portfolio. Diversify, diversify, diversify. And that's what you want to do with your gut bacteria. And one of the things, interestingly enough, I was listening to another podcast just recently. I'll give you a little hint. How interesting this one. This was a gastroenterologist who was doing this podcast. And there's actually some studies that show that probiotics may not be your best friend because they decrease your diversity, because you flood the gut with the same one or two strands of bacteria instead of having this broader diversity. So she doesn't prescribe probiotics anymore. The destruction of gut bacteria starts at birth. So where do we get our good bacteria? You get our good bacteria because when a baby comes out of the womb, they start off head up and then they turn down. And their nose are pointing towards the mother's rectum. They come out this way. So you think it's just because of the shape of their head and everything? Mm-mm. You need the baby to get a good whiff of the mother's fecal bacteria. So you now are seeding the baby's gut with the bacteria that are on the mother's perineum and near the rectum. And that's what starts kind of the process of building up the bacteria in that baby. Then you're supposed to breastfeed. Now breastfeeding, we probably have to have another talk on that because the impact of breastfeeding on gut bacteria is amazing. There are so many checks and balances to keep the baby safe and to reduce the bad guys and to increase the good guys. And that's why baby breastfeeding poop smells like yogurt and very mild. And then if you feed them formula, it stinks because they smell like ours because you've got bacteria like us, which the baby cannot fight back. And these bacteria get into their bloodstream and gives them urinary tract infection and sepsis and those sort of things. So problem number one, if a baby's born by C-section, it doesn't get the whiff of bacteria from the mother's perineum. Then if they don't breastfeed, you select a whole other population of bacteria. Iron in this case is important too. You flood them with iron that are not absorbed in formula the way it is in breastfeeding, and all this iron goes to the colon, which feeds the bad guys. And then you give them tons of antibiotics. But one thing that's really interesting about the gut bacteria in a baby, if you are born in Italy, so vaginal birth in Italy versus vaginal birth in a community in Africa that has not been at all in contact with the modern world, other than for maybe researchers observing. They did gut bacteria studies on those babies who were breastfed, and as long as they were exclusively breastfed, the bacteria population in both communities were the same.
Wow.
That is amazing, okay? And you would think because the mother's bacteria were different, that the baby got a whiff of something different, but no. They were the same. It's not until the baby started eating the food of their environment at 6 months that the bacteria started to be different. So whenever nature does something like this that's across the board around the world the same, we should take notice. Those are some things that says, hey guys, nature says this is important. You know, don't mess with me. There's a reason for this. Even if we don't understand it, that doesn't mean it's not important. So formula feeding, antibiotics after antibiotics. Every time you take antibiotics to kill the bad guys, you wipe everything out. Most ear infections are viral. They don't need antibiotics anyway. You know, the other day, thank God it's, you know, I'm where I am now, but I had about a period of time where I got coughing, and my sinuses were hurting, and I got goopy and yellow stuff coming out of my nose, and anybody would have gone to the doctor and gotten antibiotics, but I didn't. Just, you know, moisture and everything, finally unclogged the nose, and everything is fine, and I'm alive. And I protected my microbiome. Anyway, and then you have meat contamination with antibiotics. You know, story of my sister. She, my mother had some issues and ended up not breastfeeding her, and she wanted, at the time we didn't have formula, you know, this was 50 plus years ago, and she got milk from the farmer next door, and that wanted milk from a cow that was really healthy and everything. My sister had diarrhea and was the crankiest, most annoying baby for the first 6 months of her life. Diarrhea, failed to thrive, terrible. My mother then wanted to make yogurt herself, and she would order yogurt seed from the company that made the yogurt. And that's very concentrated bacteria. And her yogurt culture would last maybe 2 or 3 rounds and then die. So she concluded that the company gave her bad seed and complained. They sent her more. Same thing happened. Finally, the chemist at the company said, look, it's not us. We're making yogurt with this stuff, and it's not killing it. He said, you need to check with your farmer, see what's in the milk. Come to find out, the cow was getting penicillin shots. My sister was sick for 6 months, because she was getting penicillin that was coming through the cow's milk. And they would give the cows shots to prevent mastitis, right? So now, as soon as my mother then went to, we had what we call sterilized milk, where they do high temperature. This is a shelf-stable cow's milk, and she made her baby milk with that. Diarrhea stopped in a day. It was unbelievable.
Wow.
And you know, to this day, I still blame that to my sister has a terrible gut, and she is miserable. And if she, I mean, she's plant-based, but if she eats too much fiber, I mean, it just throws her off. I mean, she has to be so careful. And I think it's all from the beginning that messed her up a lot. Healthy diet changes the bacteria and will eventually knock down the cravings for unhealthy foods. So I like to explain my, the things that are produced by the body or by the food as you digest it that's not good for you, as my purple minions. I mean, who's not I'm a fan of the minions. I mean, I love them. And the purple minions are mean, and they are disruptive. And so when I explain to my patients what's going on in their body when they're eating like chicken nuggets and bologna and processed food, you produce these chemicals, some of which you could measure. And we're talking about chemicals in the thousands versus the hundreds, depending on what you're eating. If you're eating plants, it's in the hundreds, and it's in the tens of thousands if you're eating the animal foods, particularly the processed foods. And those free radicals basically drives inflammation and damage to your gut. So just like the purple minions, they're creating havoc. And then you have the good bacteria, which are going to protect you. And when you eat the foods that have a lot of antioxidants, it's like yellow minions coming in, and they kind of help and repair things and tidy things up. And if a yellow minion touches a purple minion, the purple minion turns yellow, right? So the yellow minion will essentially, antioxidant will give to the purple minion what it's lacking and kind of neutralize it. But you can imagine if you're eating processed foods and you don't eat any vegetables, there's not enough yellow to counteract the purple, and that's where your body goes, has wear and tear, and eventually, you get sick. Now, the good bacteria will produce chemicals that are helpful to stabilize your lining and kind of keep things really good. You have several things that are necessary. You have the cells themselves, and in between the cells you have things called tight junctions, which is like the cement that holds the cells together. And inflammation will erode the cement, so larger molecules can sneak in between the cells into your body, and that drives inflammation. That's called leaky gut. Now, when you have a healthy bacterial population, you also have a layer of mucus where all those bacteria are living, and they're kind of like your guards, and they're kind of walking back and forth in front of you. It's like, oh, you're coming in. No, you're not coming in, and they kind of control the traffic. But as you're getting the bad guys, you disrupt that whole system, and things are now falling apart on. The omega-3 to omega-6, which is the inflammatory versus non-inflammatory fatty acids. We eat way too many inflammatory ones, and so that throws you off. If you restore that balance, you get better. Now, people tell you to restore the balance by eating more fish, but the problem is fish has a lot of inflammatory omegas too. They have a little bit more of that anti-inflammatory, but you're increasing both. If you eat kale, you get the proper balance, which is 1 to 5 as opposed to 1 to 30. You see. And then you don't have to calculate. You don't have to take fish oil pills and all that kind of stuff that makes your breath smell fishy. Will you change immediately? No. This is why if you today go from a processed food, meat-eating diet, and you switch gears and you go full-blown green smoothie, oatmeal, followed by a huge kale salad, you're going to have diarrhea. Because those bacteria in there are not used to handling all that fiber, and you gotta be careful. Autoimmune diseases are considered by some as a foodborne illness. because of the inflammation that the foods create, which then gets your immune system going nuts and causing, causing it to continue to act and damage you without a cause. So if you have a splinter in your finger, the normal immune system will attack that splinter. Your finger will hurt. Now, aside from the poke of the splinter, it'll start throbbing. And that's from the inflammatory substances that are produced. You have an alert, something's wrong. It turns red, more blood flow. It swells. In a case of, say, if your ankle is sprained, it helps immobilize you and keep you from hurting it more. Then white cells are come in and they're hitting that splinter. And then you'll see pus, and that's dead white cells, the soldiers that fallen into battle. And then eventually the thing pops out, or you take it out, or whatever. And then our immune system has a system that calls off the troops, says, okay, we're done here, time to clean up, and you bring the cleanup crew, and then everything goes back in order. And before you know it, you may have a little scar, and that's it. So the proper functioning immune system has a turn-on system that will attack and do what you got to do to protect you. And when the job is done, there's a turn-off switch. A truck has to have an accelerator and brakes. How dangerous would our cars be if we didn't have brakes? And that's exactly what happens in the body. The brakes are turned off. You cannot use them anymore. And this immune driving forces that have been just churning our immune system causes us to continue to have, as if the splinter was still there, but you continue to damage the finger to the point where it falls off or have a big sore. And that's how I explain how Crohn's disease happened, or arthritis, or any of those things. The cause, or maybe the trigger, is gone, maybe, but your immune system doesn't have a clue how to stop. And that's because we've made it go, and kind of ramping the engine and never turning it down. The heart disease, back to that TMAO, not found in vegans, found in omnivores. And then colon cancer, also chronic inflammation. We know, for example, in patients with colitis and Crohn's, that if you don't control the inflammation, your colon cancer risk increases. Celiac disease is a perfect example. Inflammation due to gluten causing damage to the bowel. If you don't control it, you have a high risk of small bowel cancer. If you take your diet seriously and you completely heal the gut, your risk of cancer goes back down to normal. You see, because you're not using medications that are changing the risk of cancer in and of themselves. So, gut bacteria, you need fiber. Americans get, if you're lucky, about 15 grams of fiber a day. You're supposed to get 25. 15 grams of fiber is what's in, a potato and, a little salad. It's nothing, and even that much. And most of them get it through a pill. The RDA, which is the recommended daily allowance, is 25 grams. American Heart Association has made a bold leap into recommending 30 to 40 grams. God forbid you have double of what you're supposed to have. And keep in mind that fiber supplements don't work. It does not count if you take Metamucil, fiber gummies, or any kind of fiber supplements. Those things are just to be thrown into the trash can and don't. If you eat an apple and you have 3 to 4 grams of fiber from an apple, the fiber from the apple plus all the stuff in the apple will work differently than if you take the apple and take the component, a pill of vitamin C, a pill of fiber, a pill of this, a pill of that. They won't work, but the apple will. So I tell my patients, I say, throw the gummies away and let's eat the fruit and the vegetables. All right, more gut bacteria with the nutritionist that was following the doctor, but basically just more on the same refrain. The worst food for your gut bacteria are fatty foods. The fatty foods will increase your bile secretion, and bile is toxic. It's toxic to the healthy bacteria, so then you promote bile tolerant bacteria, which then produces secondary bile acids, which are then causing inflammation in the gut. I am on a campaign to protect your gallbladder. Do not let people take your gallbladder out just to see if your bellyache will go away. I mean, I have kids today, I had a mother who comes in and she had the diagnosis. My child is having a bellyache, I think it's a gallbladder, but the doctor won't do any tests. Will you do some tests? I said, I'll be happy to do some tests, but we're keeping the gallbladder. And even if it's a little bit sick, we're gonna make it better. But the removal of a gallbladder means that you have a constant trickle of bile in your GI tract, which means that at night when you're not eating, that bile touches your colon without having to mix with food, and that increases the risk of colon cancer because the bile is digesting your tissues.
Wow.
So it's not innocuous to just take somebody's gallbladder out because their tummy hurts. It's a bad thing. And then you have carnitine, which is, again, the amino acid in eggs, cheese, and chicken. That goes to the liver. The TMAO build the plaque in the arteries, increase inflammation. You heard that before. So what's good for you, the way she puts it, any food rich in fiber, whole grain cruciferous. Her top 5, I'm not saying that this is the general top 5, but she says always have broccoli, banana, beans, blueberries, and some sort of fermented food. So basically, I'll tell you, anything from a plant will work. She says to watch out from kimchi. Kimchi is fermented cabbage, Chinese cabbage. Apparently, she found some studies that seem to correlate some of the components in kimchi to stomach cancer. Kombucha, also, if you consume, that's a fermented drink. So basically, it's kind of like, it almost kind of turns a sweetened juice into more like a vinegary kind of thing. And if you drink a very large amount, you can have too much acid in your body. And you got to drink a large amount. So this is the My Plate from the PCRM, which is Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, which is what our government took example on, but noticed that instead of putting legumes, they put protein. Basically implied you should eat meat. And then, of course, we're missing the glass of milk on the side of the plate. So Dr. Greger talked about back pain, and that got my attention because many of you may not know, but before I started my plant-based journey, I had some serious back problems, and I herniated disc in my back so bad that this leg was paralyzed, and I could barely walk. And it was very scary and everything, but I knew in my gut that surgery was not an option. I just, when the orthopedist looked at me, I went, the way he looked at me, he smiled funny, and I'm like, ugh. But fortunately, I was able to meet some really good physical therapists. We rehabbed, but I always had to be careful. And then I go plant-based, not careful anymore. I can do sit-ups. I can sit in the car for 3 hours and not have to do back exercises. Why would that be? Well, prevalence of back pain, 84%, about 1 in 5 American at some point in their life is going to have problems. And basically there's been some pretty good data that shows that the arteries to the spine, which are the tiniest of all, are blocked. And you can see that on angio, basically putting dye in those arteries. And it is predictor of risk of heart attack. So when you start having lower back pain, particularly if it goes down your leg, that means that your arteries to your discs are blocked. The discs are not getting the food that they're supposed to get. They start degenerating and pushing onto the nerves, and that's a predictor of heart attack. Just as for the gentleman, erectile dysfunction is a predictor of heart disease as well. Tiny blood vessels not working very well. So the MRI also shows that the arteries clogged in a back pain patient, and if you see those arteries clogged on the MRI, you have 8.5 times more likely to have lower back pain. So when people say there's not a correlation between these artery clogging, there really is. And all you got to do is to see how quickly the back pain goes away when you actually change your diet. It's just totally amazing. So by the age of 49, 97% of discs will show degeneration if you're eating the standard American diet. So it becomes a new normal. You got to be real careful with this. It's like people say, well, I have back pain when I get older, that's normal because everybody has it. No, it's not normal. It's because you're eating the standard American diet. I have diabetes, I have high blood pressure, I have this, I have that. I need my strokes, my heart attack, my nursing home, my rails in my house, and my coffin. Okay, so correlation between cholesterol level and disc degeneration, there's some correlation there as well. And then there's probably also the degeneration of the disc may be the result also of impaired waste management, since what doesn't go in, you can't remove the waste, so you may have some toxic effect. The discs are more sensitive, and you can see changes in the disc by age 11. I have to tell you that, and I may be just more aware of the situation, but I see younger and younger patients having lower back pain, and they all say, oh, it's my posture, and yes, your posture sucks, but when you have sciatica, I have kids, I know they have L4, L5 because their pain is right here. I know they have L5S1 because their pain is on their leg. It's correlating with them sitting for long periods of time, et cetera, et cetera. I've done MRIs on those kids. I've seen their disc degenerate, and they all eat the standard American diet. So, but it's reversible. That's the beautiful thing about it. Ibuprofen. You guys know how much I love ibuprofen. All right. If it was me, we'd have a campaign like they had with Zantac to take it off the market. So 1,000 marathon runners taking ibuprofen show no advantage for pain control. So don't waste your money or your stomach and your GI tract. 5 times the incidence of organ damage. So these people who were taking the 1,000 marathon runners taking ibuprofen, they all hurt because, again, they're drinking their milk for recovery and eating the standard American diet. So they're all hurting. 5 times organ damage incidence. So some of these people, because they run hard for long periods of time, don't have enough circulation to their organs because everything goes to their muscles. And their endothelium is not working to dilate their vessels, so they have deprivation of oxygen. And it's a well-known phenomenon among long-distance runners that you can have bloody diarrhea at the end of your run. And it's called ischemic colitis, and that means that what happened is you didn't get enough blood flow to your colon, and your colon will start bleeding.
And which ones is the ibuprofen?
Well, the ibuprofen, yeah. See, so the ibuprofen will make that worse
No, but
because,
which brand or which?
oh, any brand.
Just
Yeah, generically speaking, yeah.
Yeah, but I was, it's not Tylenol, it's.
Tylenol is
That's
acetaminophen, right, it's different, right. So, out of the 1,000, there were 3 people with kidney failure, 4 GI bleeds, and 2 heart attacks. They were all in the medication group. None of them were in the non-medicated group, even though they hadn't changed their diet, okay? So I consider ibuprofen is a very dangerous medication. I discourage my patients to take it. There's actually some studies that show that if you have, say, a sprain and you take ibuprofen, you will not heal your tendons properly, and you will be more likely to have more sprains and more damage in the future. There is something to be said about your body creating inflammation, about staying off your feet when you're injured, and about allowing your body to do the healing without interference from these medications. Our children are getting doused in it, like every time the kid gets a fever, they get alternating Tylenol, ibuprofen. For those of you who have grandkids or young enough to maybe still have children, there's never been an article that has proved that combination of medicine was superior to just using Tylenol and tepid bath. You know? So why do we use it? Because somebody started it and now everybody uses it. And I've seen some kids get a pill of Tylenol. I remember this one little boy, stomach virus. Okay, so his stomach's messed up. He had a fever. Mom gives him a Tylenol, a ibuprofen pill. The next, a few hours after taking that pill, he started having excruciating abdominal pain. Went into the hospital and had a perforated duodenal ulcer. The thing is like you take a branding hot iron, you put it on the thing and it go psh, and it'll burn a hole all the way down to Australia. I mean, it's horrible.
Dr. Maryelle, this really concerns me. I'm very ignorant. I never knew what ibuprofen. I've heard of it and didn't know what it was. But when I broke my wrist a few weeks back, they immediately wanted to put me on some kind of drugs.
Correct.
And now I'm concerned, did I make the right decision? Because I didn't want the drugs, so they said, well, maybe then take over-the-counter ibuprofen. I didn't want to do that either, but I figured let me at least take that. But then about within a week, I had heard that somebody told me I should switch it from the Tylenol to the ibuprofen, because one affects the liver, one affects the kidneys.
Right.
Then I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, which one do I do?
But did I initially make the right choice to not even take the drugs? Because those were
Probably because
even
they
worse
would,
than-
I could tell you from experience that painkillers don't work when you have a broken wrist.
Okay.
Yeah, so you did good. And you know, despite all this, we still are surviving. I mean, you know, but I still maintain that people do not advertise sufficiently. When you have a cascade of inflammation, with inflammation comes sticky blood. So the products of inflammation causes your blood cells to be sticky, and so you're more likely to have a stroke. And the body knows that. And along in a cascade of the different products that are made in the production of inflammation, which is necessary for healing, fighting, and all that, there's also some products that are made that makes the blood more fluid. So it counteracts the effect of the inflammatory products on the sticky blood and makes it back to kind of normal, okay? When you block your chain cascade reaction, you still have inflammation, but you're blocking everything, including the products that are helping your blood not stick. And this is why if you take an ibuprofen box and you look at the insert, there is a risk of heart attack and stroke to taking those medicines.
You're saying the ibuprofen blocks that chain.
Correct.
Okay.
Because it's a COX-1-2 inhibitor, it blocks everything. So you block all of your bad stuff, so you get relief from pain, but the price you pay for that is the stickiness of your blood is not counteracted by the natural means. But then on top of that, then now you get platelets that are not going to stick together, so that if you have, say, a hemorrhagic stroke, you're going to bleed more in your brain. It's just crazy. Best thing, in my opinion, is just don't take any of this stuff. People should be told what, you know, and sometimes you do have to take something, but it's important for the patient to know the risk-benefit and have a choice, you know. But I thought this was very telling in this group of marathoners that really the ones who took the medicine had all sorts of side effects and nobody got any benefit. You know, that's crazy. So potential serious effects of taking a leaf, for example, is allergic reactions.
Does the leaf have ibuprofen?
Yeah, it's a cousin of it. It's just a stronger thing, so you only take one pill where the other people have to take 5, you know, commercial. But they're all the same. Aleve, ibuprofen, Advil, you know, any non-steroidal anti-inflammatory is going to have the same thing. And then your cardiovascular health risk. All right, now we get into some more fun stuff. Let's talk about chicken. Are we okay on time, Kathy? We're good? You guys are not tired? You're not bored? Can I keep going, or do I need to come back another time to tell you about the chicken?
Keep going.
You guys are good? Okay.
Go ahead,
So,
Deb, that's
Neil
fine.
Barnard's exam room interview on chicken, you gotta listen to it, because, I mean, he's so elegant when he speaks, I don't think I can do him justice. But he talked about the concern about consuming chicken. Fecal soup. So if any of you guys had any thoughts about having some chicken soup on a cold night tonight, you might want to reconsider making it a wonderful kale soup, you know, some seaweed and stuff like that. So the problem is, when you're in a chicken factory and you're slaughtering chickens, they get hung on a little conveyor belt and they're going at higher and higher speed. You know, it's like, you know, the airplanes, you know, you go faster and faster. And an inspector is there to ensure the quality of your food. And they're supposed to look at 2 chickens per second for fecal contamination, meaning they're trying to spot ching, 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 poop smears on the chicken. And they're supposed to grab the chicken and pull it off the line, all in a half a second, right? So you know how that goes. They studied chickens from 15 stores in 10 different cities and found that pretty much, you know, everybody had contamination, and the CDC estimates that 48 million people will have foodborne illnesses per year 128,000 will be hospitalized and 3,000 will die in the United States alone from eating contaminated chicken. The USA consumes 1 million chicken per hour, and chicken absorbs stuff like a sponge. So what he explained is you've got the chicken comes in, they hang him by the feet alive, they slash their throat, blood everywhere, they dip them in something to pull the feathers out, they gut them, poop everywhere. Well, you gotta clean them up, so you dip them in the bath. And all that chicken meat actually sucks up, I mean, you don't have a new bath for each chicken. So you know after the 1,000th chicken that made it into that bath, even if there's a little bit of circulation in there, I mean, there is some serious contamination. And the chicken flesh absorbs that. So the inspector who's watching your slaughtered chicken come through, he might catch in 2 per second a big smear of poop, but he's not going to be able to assess the fact that the chicken meat has absorbed bacteria.
So all of it is absorbed, every piece that goes back.
Yeah, so this is what a chicken processing plant looks like. I spared you some of the gorier pictures, but there's the poor chickens that are going through. They're hanging by their feet, and they're killed and bled. They bleed to death is what they do. And so then they go to a scalding tank to remove the feathers or the skin, depending on. And then the feces splatter everywhere when they're gutted. And then the warm chicken. So now they're warm because they've been in hot stuff to take their feathers off. They have to go through a cooling bath, and now you get to this fecal soup contamination. So there you go. See, and I mean this is what goes on at Tyson and everywhere. And see, they're going through, and then they get put into little trays, and welcome to your kitchen.
And then they tell you how to wash your chicken when you get it home.
So the chicken muscle absorbs the fecal soup. The inspector checks 140 chickens per minute. He removes the obvious chicken platter. The chicken thawing after being frozen will ooze fecal soup all over your counters. So there's actually some studies that shows that if you bring a chicken meat into your house, and a person would approach it the way they know how to clean, you'll have 100% contamination of your surfaces, the knobs of your stove, the refrigerator, everything you've touched. If you instruct people to wash their hands and do like a deep scrubbing cleaning, you will still have the same contamination. Only if you bleach everything that you will have a reduction in the contamination. Who bleaches their kitchen?
My job for the past several years has been to bring turkeys for Thanksgiving. And last year I could not stand the thought of having a raw turkey in my house.
Right.
So I went and grabbed a couple of smoked turkeys already. And I was like, I just can't handle raw meat in the house at all.
So the study of the 15 stores in 10 cities showed 48% were fecally contaminated inside the chicken flesh. So not just the surface. And then the inspection doesn't pick that up. And any animal flesh, really, what Dr. Barnard was pointing out, has the same problem because it's not any better in the slaughterhouses for bigger animals. So people will say, well, spinach has contamination too. I mean, for one, if they would quit using the raw manure of the animals to, sprinkle over your spinach, that would help. But you can wash the vegetables, and the contamination will go away. So the biggest part, I mean, like up in Northeast, they use pig, and they aerosolize the pig poop to handle it because there's too much. I mean, you get these big vats of poop and people, you don't know where to put it. When you have animal factories, they have more animals in one of those factories than you would have in a large city. Hundreds of thousands of head of animals. They don't have to have a sewage system. So all that runs off into your rivers and the sea, and then when they get too much of it, then what they do is they take them and they aerosolize it and they spray it around your area. And there's actually some correlation between the respiratory illnesses in the north and some of the pig farms. And it's terrible. So avoid animal farms. Don't live nearby. But if we didn't have animal farms, then we wouldn't have the contamination of vegetables. This is kind of an estimation of the foodborne illnesses. There's about 31 known bugs that they're looking for. Look at that, 9.4 million. And then, you know, I mean, look at that. Total 47 million people have gotten sick from foodborne illnesses. That's an estimated annual number of illnesses total. And then the hospitalization is 127,000, and then annual numbers of death, about 3,000 people. I mean, it's too much. We shouldn't be losing people over this. So what Dr. Barnard says is you take a chicken breast and you stick it into an unflushed toilet. You swirl it around for a little bit to let it absorb the feces. And your feces are probably better than the ones that they've absorbed because they don't have all these bacteria, superbugs in them, you know. And then you cook it and you eat it. You might kill the bacteria, but then you still are not killing, you know, the worms and insects from the intestinal tract. Cooking the chicken, of course, produces heterocyclic amines, which are the cancer-producing substances. So you're trading one evil, which is your bacteria, for another, which is the cancer-promoting substances. So you're just jumping from the frying pan into the deep fryer. Every major restaurant chain will have these components in cooked chicken. So it doesn't matter how you cook it. If you're cooking it on high heat, you will have those components, and they're all cancer-producing. If you like to eat pooped, you know, and chlorine from the bath, go for it. You know, I mean, this is essential. You can imagine how Dr. Barnard presents the information. I mean, it's just elegant. But, and he says all that in such an elegant way. I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish I could say that way. But it's so disgusting that I just, you know. So they petitioned Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, petitioned the USDA in 2013, and they wanted to put on the label that there's feces in all of your chicken. And it's an adulterant, which is basically unfit for human consumption. And they requested to regulate and remove the adulterated food from the line. And also to place a warning label on the product that people should eat this at their own risk, and what the risk is. That didn't go over too well. They also need a petition to remove the word wholesomeness out of the packaging of chicken, because I say unless eating poop is wholesome to you, it's probably not a fair statement about the chicken. The USDA then came back with a zero tolerance for visible feces, but it can still back in line after it's been sprayed off. So if you got a chicken covered in poop, they'll take it off the line, they'll spray it down, and they'll stick it back into the line. Isn't that great? And then there's still no USDA testing for fecal material that's absorbed in the flesh. You know, I mean, these chickens make it through, and that's it. So this is kind of what they were proposing, you know, mythic farm chicken, inspected, warning, contains feces, 100% real carcinogens after grilled. Yeah, I mean, but it's the truth, isn't it? You know? I love the story on Zantac. You guys have seen all the headlines on Zantac, right? I have my own personal hypothesis as to why this is happening, and I can share it with you outside of the talk because I don't want to record it. But the stuff that's in Zantac that's scaring everybody, you know where it is? Where else it is? Chicken, milk, infant formulas, drinking water. There's a carcinogen in Zantac, that's why they removed it all off the shelves. And that same chemical, which is a pesticide residue, is found in everything you eat, in particularly animal flesh, where it's concentrated. There's a chemical in Zantac that is cancer promoting, and that chemical is a pesticide residue that is found in many foods that we eat. Bacon, for example.
But what's it called?
Oh, MDNA or something like that. Yeah, some big long. But you know, you know, my office was asking me, what do we do with all the phone calls about Zantac? I said, I want to talk to them. Because you're scared about Zantac? A little bit of pill? Which, this is a great opportunity for conversation of change your diet, you'll get off to Zantac, yay. But are you feeding your child bacon, sausage, chicken, milk? You got lots of stuff in there too, and you're not scared? Oh my God, All
I
right.
guess Ensure has it too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's coming from milk. Worst contaminant in chicken products, feces, top of the line. So fecal soup for an hour before being packaged for consumers. You got also chemicals, chlorine, peracetic acid that's used to try to clean the feces off the chicken. Superbugs, 75% of bacteria tainted chicken will be resistant to antibiotics, so you bring that into your home. Incidentally, chickens who are organic are only organic after day 1 of life. They're allowed to get antibiotics on day 1. So you're already selecting out some superbugs on day 1. They may not get antibiotics later, but you've gotten them nicely doused. And considering that they grow a chicken in less than 30 days nowadays, and you just. And then arsenic, that's cool. And then cholesterol, of course, that clogs your arteries.
Where does the arsenic come from?
The soil. So for example, a big part of arsenic problem in Texas, Arkansas, Georgia, North Carolina is the boll weevils and the cotton. The boll weevils were a big problem for the cotton industry. So the plants were sprayed with pesticides containing arsenic, and the arsenic does not leave the soil.
Oh, a long time ago.
Yeah, at
And
that
then it's still in the
time. So
soil.
then now you're growing grains on the soil that had arsenic. Now, you can get some arsenic if you eat the rice, for example, from these.
Right, the brown rice
Correct.
here.
But
is arsenic.
at the same time, if you eat the flesh of animals who ate grains that grew on that, they have concentrated arsenic in their flesh.
Oh, the chickens are eating the rice.
Correct.
That's
Or
gotcha.
they're eating the corn or whatever
Or
it is
corn
grown on
from
that.
the
So
south.
the arsenic will So again, people are scared of brown rice, but you should be scared of chicken too. You see, I will not eat the brown rice, but I will eat my chicken.
Well, because chicken manure or whatever is commonly used in organic farming everywhere.
I know,
And but I think the belief is that
but they should be
like
organic.
greens don't uptake arsenic the way
Right.
their grains.
Yeah, and that's, the greens don't, but you still have the superbugs, which is why you get some of the, contamination.
I think it has to be composted down though before they can.
You would think.
Yeah, I mean, like, no, I know it. That's a.
You would hope.
Well, it's the rule. I mean, but no, like that. So organic farmers,
Right.
have to get their nitrogen from somewhere. That's not.
And see the way we used to do that back home is you plant cloves and you turn it into the ground. And then you plant your grains.
Yeah.
And your nitrogen comes from the roots
Right,
and
yeah,
the
the
cloves and
crop
the leaves and then you do crop rotation. Because the farmers would know which crop goes after which and which one drains the soil and all that. But the monoculture that we have, the same crop year after year after
Right.
year on the same ground, it's killing the soil.
Hmm.
So PCRM then submitted a request due to the Freedom of Information Act to be able to get more information. They didn't get a response, so they filed a lawsuit to have the USDA act on the petition. So far, no change. So it still continues. But the USDA program decided to speed up the lines because the poor chicken farmers and the manufacturers are not making enough money. They have fewer inspectors, and they had plans to privatize the inspectors. So now you know that the industry will select people that are going to be friendly to their cause. The thing that got my attention too is chicken and urinary tract infection, because I have a lot of patients who come to me and they talk to me about their general health history, and a lot of little girls have urinary tract infection. And then my next question is, how much chicken do you eat? Now I'm like, well, what does this have to do with urinary tract infection? Well, this has to do. So they did DNA analysis of the bacteria that was in the infection of the urine. And they found that this bacteria matched with the chicken bacteria. So the chicken bacteria are consumed by the person, survive the stomach acid and everything, will live in the colon for some time, and then sneak out and go and infect, particularly women because of the proximity of the entrance to the bladder to their fecal area. So you find it in a GI tract, and of course it's contaminated in all your surfaces in the kitchen. So even as poor little, sweet Susie is not eating the chicken, but the brother is having chicken for dinner. She's touching the surfaces, and she's probably getting contaminated as well. But this is something interesting. When I talk to my patients about that, and I have, the moms will tell me, oh, I have a lot of UTIs and everything. I said, did you switch from beef to chicken, to try to be healthy? And they're like, oh, yeah, we eat chicken all the time. I said, you might want to try not to eating the chicken and not talk about the fecal soup and all that kind of stuff. And they're like, ugh.
So, Dr. Vreeland, I have a question. So, like, other animals don't have this fecal soup. I mean, I know
Oh, yeah,
there's
they
really
all
other
do.
problems,
They
but
all have a fecal soup, but chicken
it's just chickens that are stuck in the
chicken,
fecal
well,
soup.
they all are dipped and, cleansed and everything. I mean, if you ever seen pictures of a beef, of a cattle slaughtering house? Oh my God.
Right.
It's awful.
But you're saying the chickens
the
are
chicken
worse than other
porous,
forms
yeah,
of
they're
meat
particularly porous and absorbent.
because they're soaking
Correct.
into fecal soup. I mean, because a cow is probably
Yeah,
too big
and they're
to
not-
soak in
yeah.
fat for
Right,
each.
they're just sprayed.
They're just cutting out the guts, right?
Well, because of the feathers, the chicken goes through.
Right, it has
They
to go
have
through
to
that
be
hot-
dipped. They have to be dipped in a hot something to get the feathers off. Yeah.
Well, this is stuff you never hear in school.
So Dr. Barnard suggested that some of these people who are sick for a couple of days, you got a little rumble and all that, could very well be just an early stage of a GI bug that didn't really get a full pull, didn't get you fully sick. And some people say I had a little food poisoning or this and that. But it could be an infection from the chicken with bacteria taken in small doses, just enough to make you a little miserable. And I see that, I see tons of kids as they get older and they have recurrent after recurrent diarrhea. They'll have diarrhea like twice a month, for a week or something like that. So I try to investigate with them, where do you get your chicken? So, conclusion. Whew. A prescription with no side effects. Eat your vegetables. Okay? And that's it, guys. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.